No? Okay. Got it about covered? All right, so the form of the wall is like a wide angle like this looking up from above it. And if you're looking head on, this is the ground. And there's two slabs of granite put together like that. Okay, so you would start practically like here. That's the beginning, right? And this is the end. Right? So either alphabetical, service, rank, date and time he died, etc., 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 all that way. All right? So far? But you obviously know if I've taken this much time that this ain't the way it's done. And you're not wrong. You're Americans. She's an American too. But a different axiology is in operation. And that's one of the Nichols's points about axiology. It works unconsciously, whether you're aware of it or not. So, she was born in 59. 4 years younger than me, essentially. She designed the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and the Civil Rights Memorial groundswell, the Way Field, and many other amazing and influential architectural projects. In addition to being an architect, she's a sculptor and an artist. She is the author of a book called Boundaries. Both her parents were artistic. Her mother was a poet and her father made ceramics. Both taught courses at Ohio University in Athens. She was the co-valedictorian of her high school class and had little trouble getting into Yale. It was there she enrolled for a class in burial architecture taught by Andrus Burr. He asked her to enter the contest to design a memorial for Vietnam veterans. Now, if you know any non-vets or any of us who were around during that time, it is a painful time. It's a painful time for the country, a lot like, there are a lot of divisions just like there are today, often along the same lines. So her winning design consists of two long black granite walls intersecting at a 125-degree angle. Each wall is 246 3/4 feet long and 10 feet tall. The walls taper down to a point at each end. So, in other words, close to 500 feet long. The wall contains the 58,175 names of those who died or are listed as MIA in Vietnam during the war. The walls themselves are carved into the earth so that the people descend into the memorial. So when her design was picked as the winner for the contest, she was a senior at Yale. The design itself was an object of a lot of controversy, and actually there's some racism within that too. So opponents of the design called it a black scar in the earth and were angry that a memorial for Vietnam was designed by a person of Asian origin. So, like, literally that was the discussion. Wait, she's Asian, not American? Huh. Like, how American can you get? College student at Yale? And by the way, the war wasn't against the Chinese. It was Vietnamese. But certain people, racism doesn't make the distinction. But she's an American. So, after the vitriolic controversy, vitriol, in case you didn't know, is sulfuric acid. The vitriolic controversy surrounding the design, many of the people who went to the memorial were surprised at how well the elegant yet simple monument honored those who had died. And when you go there, if you go there, and I strongly suggest you visit our nation's capital and take a week or two, because there's a lot to see. You go to that place, and I can't describe it any other way, but the vibe there quiets people down. It's really solemn. You can definitely feel it. So she's a hero because her design was under heavy fire from the government and the press. She held her ground, refused to change it. And so the beautiful moving memorial is there for all to touch and see. So soul might mean that you stand your ground for what is right, even if it means your death, but even though she wasn't necessarily threatened with death. So this is a composite shot of two different directions. So one shows the Lincoln Memorial and the other shows the Washington Monument from two different directions. And what you can see in this particular picture is it's highly reflective. So one of the things that Maya said herself, she said that Vietnam was this wound in the national psyche. And so what she wanted to portray in the memorial was acknowledging, look, this is a wound. It is painful, but it involves death. And a lot of death. So I wanted to basically, and people have been buried in the ground, right? Or if they're missing in action or whatever. So I wanted to basically, it's as if a knife cut into the ground and cut away and then was polished. So essentially what you're seeing as you approach this is you have 58,000 names of the dead engraved in this wall, but you can't read the names as you approach it. But the first thing you can see, as you can see within that particular graphic, is you can see yourself reflected among the names of the dead. And that kind of quiets you down. We are the dead are us. And then you get closer, and so when you try and basically look for your particular loved one, and you try and go alphabetical, no. You try and go by date, no. There's a different axiology in operation here. So that's another view where you can see towards the middle of one of these. There's a lawn, so it's literally like a knife cutting into the earth. And it's like you're descending into the earth as you go towards the center. And that's what it looks like up close. So, here's the axiology that's in operation. It's an Asian axiology. What's their view of time? Don't know if you read the chart, but their view of time is time begins at and ends in the same place. The present moment. So, here's the present moment. This is the beginning of the war. You move in a circle, clockwise, or sunwise, as we in Native America call it, and here's the end of the war. Time begins and ends at the same place. The day that you died, that's your group. No matter, because death joins us all, beyond rank, beyond race, beyond any of the human distinctions that we make. The day that you died, that's your group. So she basically fit all the years of the war into this space. So the day that you died, that's your group. And you can see how the names are basically put together. Now, this is a trip for people because they don't know about axiology. And, okay, well, why aren't the names in order? I'm trying to find it by alphabetical. Not there. I'm trying to find it by chronological. So they start at the end and move. No, it's not that. Time begins and ends at the same place, the center, this present moment. All eternity in a single moment. And this is basically when you approach it, you can see yourself among the names of the dead. We are the dead are us. So if you know where to find your loved one and you basically make many visits, then you know exactly where to go. And this is actually a fairly common experience where if you notice that people have been, with this particular image, people have been photoshopped into the image so that you notice there's soldiers there that are not in the frame. Okay, well, maybe, yeah, you have to see it on a smaller screen to see that. But so also what you see a lot of people do is they'll do rubbings, pencil against paper, too. So this is actually pretty deep for people. Definitely deeper than Americans go most of the time. So because of that, some people, after the wall was put up, some people needed a statue, an object, because that's the dominant axiology. Now, there is a book that is a helpful guide so that if you wanted to find your loved one or loved ones by alphabetical, you can do that. By service, you can do that. By rank, you can do that. Or by the date they died on the wall. So there's a book that helps you do that, right? That wasn't enough, so we come up with an object. One black, one white, one of indeterminate racial persuasion. And then also women serve too, so boom, we had an object. Even though the women are memorialized in the wall, we needed an object. We of Euro-American axiology needed an object because the wall is too deep. So in 88, Maya completed graduate school and began work on the Civil Rights Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama. Quotes Martin Luther King, paraphrased from the book of Amos in the Bible, until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. So water flows over those inscriptions. And that's the Civil Rights Memorial. So water's flowing over that so people can touch that. So for example, Rosa Parks with a timeline. So part of, just to continue, the idea of, we actually covered this last week. But when we look at products of different cultures in axiology and see how that's coded, like the wall basically is representing Asian axiology as well, and the interface between Asian axiology and the civil rights movement, which is an American movement but largely identified with certain African Americans like Martin Luther King. When she's designing a memorial, basically she has to take that culture into account as well with things that are representative and respectful. So she did that within the wall by basically taking, her American culture and her, acculturation and to some degree assimilation, but acculturation and basically saying, okay, this is such a controversy, what we need is cohesion in the group. So I need something to bring us together beyond our differences, because that ain't going to happen within this American racial context. It's not going to happen. So I'm going to create something that transcends that, even if it's like my own home culture, and unconsciously doing that. So when we look at then other cultural artifacts that's art. So the idea is, for example, with that construct out of Vodun from David Bradley's book. basically, why would God send a message to some and not to all? And why would you basically say that God is placing you above us and not that we're not equal in creation? So this is, I think I included this in the last piece from last week. So that allegory in real events. So how you can steal someone's spirit by telling lies that make them afraid instead of teaching them to be more deeply connected through their souls to all life. Now, in African American culture, the term soul is not a theological term, it's a technical term. Technical meaning like technology. Technology meaning a study of technique. Okay, that refers to something transpersonal. That is beyond what you can see. With your senses. That is, the beyond exists, we can talk about it. The invisible world is around us. Ancestors and unborn children are around us. And we simply access it because it's like a normal part of life. Death is part of life. Death and life are basically interconnected. So when we start getting into, I had a lot of fun talking with Nichols and developing, this story in my own way of presenting this. I needed a more practical way of grounding this material. And part of what I deal with on a more or less daily basis is this whole piece with addictions. What is it? Why are there, people actually came in today and said, why is this so prevalent? What is this? Why? Why is this? Well, there's kind of like, okay, in our framework, in an African framework, addiction is slavery. Because it's essentially, that's part of our axiology and our axiochemistry and our understanding of that idea. So all addictions are kind of based on a lie. And then so recovery from that addiction is based on deeper and deeper levels of truth-telling and discovery. It might mean you might have to give up the things that you were raised with, because they might have to give way to a deeper truth. Like, you were all, at one point in your lives, be truthful, you believed in Santa Claus. Right? Or the Easter Bunny. Until you grew up, right? And they told you the real deal, but you maintained the fiction for younger siblings. Didn't you? Right. I'm not saying this is bad. Okay? But I'm saying, okay, well then they said, oh, well, everybody's Santa Claus, or Santa Claus is the spirit of giving, or, okay, or you could be Jewish, and that's what they do. We got a Hanukkah, we got, whatever your thing is, right? In your particular religious framework, okay? And we'll be tolerant. These people believe this, we believe that. Whatever. All right? So, recovery is based on deeper and deeper levels of truth-telling and discovery. So when we talk about within an African-American context of healing, we would call, for example, racism is a co-occurring disorder. Have I told you this yet? All right. So this is part of our science. And this is, when Nichols came up with axiology, he's saying, okay, I'm going to take this Western philosophical construct It's this philosophical study of values, but I'm going to push it beyond where they usually go with it. I'm going to acknowledge, yes, values exist, and values are things you believe without proof, but why do you believe them? Because some of these things are unconscious, and they're operating in us. But Western psychology has no explanation for why Maya Lim would come up with the wall. None. Where'd she get that idea? From the spirit? What? But that the fact that the wall follows principles that are Asian cultural archetypes, that's not a coincidence. So, racism is a co-occurring disorder. That is using the English psychological concept of what a co-occurring disorder is. So what a co-occurring disorder is, co means together, and they happen together, co-occurring disorder, that is an addiction plus a mental illness. Co-occurring disorder, it's also known as dual diagnosis. Now, in the last, say, 20 years, but we can project back into the time that we're studying now, which is basically early slavery, Civil War, you had people like Samuel Cartwright saying, and he was a Southern physician, who basically said slaves were mentally ill for trying to escape slavery. He literally said and believed that. And he becomes one of his mentors is the founder of the American Psychological Association, Benjamin Rush. So when we look at today's APA and their refusal to basically acknowledge that racism has any psychological or emotional impact whatsoever, no mention of it to this day. So then we're forced to think that people who lynch other people or commit racial crimes, or people like Timothy McVeigh, are normal. They're not mentally ill. Something doesn't sit well with us. No, they're off. And they're off in a predictable way. So some of the people that have been writing about this, for example, Judy Katz, who talks about white racism, basically, and she's Jewish, so she's saying, okay, here's the critique. Racism actually looks like certain forms of schizophrenia. Denial of reality, denial, projection, justification, etc., placing blame. So why don't we just treat it like that? Now that means, okay, does Prozac cure racism? No. But what would therapy look like? Well, you have to acknowledge that there's a problem first and then treat for it. So we basically started coming up with therapies for that. Because it's not only, so for example, as a co-occurring disorder, an addiction and a mental illness, that means you're addicted to the thought patterns of racism. But if you're a victim of it, or you're a target of it, you take on the racist thinking on yourself. You project it on yourself. You internalize it. Very similar to what happens with women who are sexually abused or sexually assaulted. Did I bring this on? Is it something that I wore? Is it walking down that, whatever it is? They take on the guilt of the I just must have done something. And when you consider that most women are often sexually abused or assaulted by somebody they know, why didn't I see that coming? More guilt, etc., instead of no, it's on the perp. The only thing you should have done. No, I won't say that. Should have killed them, but can't. That doesn't always work. So recovery is based on deeper and deeper levels of truth-telling and discovery. And sometimes you might have to tell the truth yourself. So when part of a culture's axiology is how it manifests, organizes, persecutes, or utilizes perceivable differences. So that whole diversity question comes, so when I talk about racism, different axiologies, all axiologies have the capacity to create racism, all of them. But it's different within each one. So for example, in an American context, we're dealing with a particular form of white supremacy, but it compares nothing to the forms of racism that exist in Asia. And those have been going on for way longer and among other people. Many more people than we're dealing with in an American context. But it's different. Obviously, Asian racism isn't about white supremacy, but also being racist to other Asians and also considering yourself superior than other Asians as well as whites. So, but we'll collaborate with the whites because we need their money, or we need to sell them stuff. But we think we're superior and we're the actual civilization, not them. It's one possible explanation for a Chinese framework. Because remember, look how long they've been going on. So how it persecutes or utilizes perceivable differences. So both the persecution and how it does diversity. So often, to justify such systems of persecution and privilege, abridged histories. Abridged means it's cut down, edited down, supported by attending mythologies, dogma, or scientific truths. All these things are created and disseminated. The net effect, so basically, you usually start with a religious framework that basically justifies the present, and then you basically edit history to justify the present. To say, okay, we are the superior ones, and this is why we're the superior ones, and this is why we're ruling over you. And each axiology is capable of doing that in a different way. And you can see how that's in operation through their various cultural products. So the net effect creates competing systems of privilege and discrimination, have and have-nots, which can coalesce into caste systems. Well, that's our word for it. So even though we associate caste systems with, for example, the Indian subcontinent and Hindu culture, we have rich people and poor people in each axiology. And people who are often frozen within that caste for life. Now, part of the mythology of America is that whole social mobility thing, which if you notice during the whole campaign, to the degree that you could stand looking at the campaign, neither the president or Romney talked about poor people. It was all the middle class, the middle class, the middle class. Because poor people ain't doing so great. And when you have a hurricane take out the eastern seaboard, now a whole bunch of people are homeless and still without power and all that kind of stuff. And FEMA ain't responding because, well, how does FEMA respond? We supposed to be giving out bucket loads of money? We supposed to have those famous travel trailers in New York City? How are we supposed to respond to that? And what happens to the rest of the country if, on December 21st, the world does come to an end? FEMA gonna help you? I don't think the world's coming to an end, but anyway. So, net effect, creating systems of privilege and discrimination, have and have-nots, which coalesce in the caste system. So culture can also mature enough to disseminate the means for achieving unity and equality and justice among its diverse members, just as well. You can have, what we